This week for our mini lesson, we're focusing on character changes. So we're looking at how the relationships that characters have with other characters in a story may change them from the beginning towards the end or the middle of the story. The poster that I'm showing you right now says character. Authors bring their characters and subjects to life in 5 key ways. Appearance, so what the character looks like. Traits, the qualities and abilities that the character has. Voice and dialogue, how the character sounds and how the character speaks to others. Behaviors, how the character acts around another person or how they respond to any problems or conflicts that they're having. And the last one is thoughts and emotions. What does the character think and feel like? So in order for you to understand the changes a character is going through or why they're going through these changes, you have to know what they're thinking, how their normal behaviors are, their normal thoughts and emotions, so that you can see the change from what they're normally like to when there is a conflict or a big thing that happens in the story that causes them to change maybe the way they are, their traits, maybe the way they behave, they think, or they act. So let's get started with our mini lesson. Let's get started on our Wonder Character Changes mini lesson. For the I Do, I'll be focusing on Augie and how he changes from the beginning of this week's read aloud towards the end of the week's read aloud. The boxes read, in the beginning the character is, what does the character say, how does the character think or act, how does the character interact with others, how does the character change, and how do I know they have changed? So from the beginning of the story, we see that Augie has now started school and he's actually been enjoying it. Even though it's not perfect, he still has awkward interactions with different people around campus. For the most part, he's starting to like it. So at this point in the read aloud, Augie has now gotten 2 friends, Summer and Jack Will, and he has a whole chapter that is dedicated to explaining how his friendship with Jack Will is coming around, which we can see right here. So he talks about hanging out with him in class and walking to class with him and them having jokes and bonding over his awkward interactions. So here in the first box it says, in the beginning the character is, and I'm going to put Augie is beginning to develop a friendship with Jack Will. So he's now not just enjoying school, but he's starting to make his friends. And what does the character say? This is where we'll provide evidence that supports that he's starting to develop a friendship with Jack. So let me go here. And I'm going to choose this first sentence where it says, I hung out with Jack in homeroom, English, history, computer, music, and science, which were all classes we had together. So the reason that I'm choosing this as my text evidence, and I'm actually going to make my font a lot smaller, is because it shows that him and Jack are now starting to bond. They're spending all this time together. You don't hang out with people that you wouldn't consider to be a friend or someone that you get along with. Okay, so here, the next box says, how does the character think or act? So now that they've been able to start to develop a friendship and hang out on a regular basis, it seems like Augie feels like Jack Will has become someone that he can trust. So Augie thinks Jack is someone that can be trusted, considered a friend, and he feels or he acts relaxed around him. So with this new friendship and this new sense of having someone that you can trust and bond with, Augie is able to relax and be himself and just kind of start to enjoy having a friend. The next one says, how does the character interact with others? So we know that Augie is a very friendly person. He's not someone who goes around picking fights or arguing with anyone. he's friendly to the people that are friendly with him. And he also chooses to ignore or laugh about his awkward or about any stares or awkward interactions with others. So he's used to being stared at and people giving him a certain look, but instead of him reacting negatively, he chooses to just kind of either ignore it or just laugh about it. The next box says, how does the character change? So towards the end of the read aloud, we get to the chapter called The Bleeding Screen, which I will find. Just give me a moment. Ooh, it's a lot of movement. Okay, so here we go. The Bleeding Screen. In this chapter, we see something change in the relationship or friendship between Auggie and Jack. So first, they start off being really good friends, but then something happens where Auggie goes to homeroom and he sees Julian with some other boys, and they're all talking and laughing about a mask and how it looks like someone, and he realizes that they are talking about him. In this situation, he sees or he hears someone right here where it says, the person says first that if I look like him, seriously, I think I'd kill myself. And later on, that same person goes on to say that Tushman asked me to hang out with him at the beginning of the year, and he must have told the teachers to put us next to each other in all of our classes or something. The mummy shrugged. So remember, he tells us earlier that him and Jack Will are in almost all of their classes and they sit together. Then Auggie goes on to say, I knew the shrug, of course. I knew the voice. I knew I wanted to run out of the class right then and there. But I stood where I was and listened to Jack Will finish what he was saying. So right there, we see that he realizes that the mummy that is saying all these mean things about him just so happens to be Jack Will, the person that he thought was becoming friends with. So here, how does the character change? Auggie is no longer sure if he can trust Jack, even though they were becoming friends. So he's hearing Jack say these mean things about him behind his back, and now he's not sure if they were ever even friends to begin with. So how do I know they have changed? So we know that they have changed because Auggie hears Jack Will saying this stuff, and towards the end of the chapter, he says, I don't know what Jack answered because I walked out of the class without anyone knowing I had been there. My face was on fire, and I walked back down the stairs. I was sweating under my costume, and I started crying. I'm going to take this and put it here and say, Auggie says, and I'm going to insert my evidence, which I'm going to kind of cut down because it was quite a lot. Let's see if I can make this smaller. And here as well. Okay, so here I'm going to make all of this one size. And I'm going to take out the part about his face being on fire and the sweat in his costume and kind of edit what he says, but I'm putting it in quotes because it was still in the book like that. So he says this, and by reading these words, we realize that he leaves the room and is feeling betrayed by his, and in quotation marks, I'm going to put friend, because Jack really a friend if he's still talking about Augie behind his back? So I have completed the first row for the I do portion. Moving on to the we do section of the lesson, we're going to be focusing on Via. So in the beginning, the character is, and in the beginning of the story, Via is very supportive of Augie attending school and protective of him. What does the character say? So here we're going to put our evidence that supports this, which I found in the chapter that was called First Day Jitters. And I chose this evidence where she says, "Everyone's just as nervous as you are," said Via in my ear. Just remember that this is everyone's first day of school, okay? So in this quote, she shows that she's trying to be supportive and also just kind of be positive and give him a good vibe about going to school for the first time. How does the character think or act? Via seems very positive, or she seems to be a very positive influence and is someone you can count on for support. So she's there for Augie, her family members. She seemed to be there for the people that she cares about. How does a character interact with others? So with others, Via is friendly. But can also be, not also be, but can also stand up for herself and others when necessary. So she's a very friendly person, but you just can't rub her the wrong way. The next question says, how does the character change? So towards the end of this week's read aloud in the chapter called Costumes, Via seems to take a turn from the way she was at the beginning to the way she is now. So now Via seems to be struggling with something, or I'll say some conflict in school or personally, because we're not really sure what the problem is, but we can tell that something's not right. The last box says, how do I know they have changed? This week, I want you guys to find the text evidence that goes in that last box to complete the we do. And once you have finished, I want you to use this week's read aloud to show how Jack Will has changed from the beginning all the way to the end of this week's read aloud. So how did he start off with his and Augie's relationship, and how has he changed towards his and Augie's relationship at the end of this week's read aloud? If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me, send me a message, and I will be sure to help you as best as I can. Good luck, guys!